The knock came at 8:30. 3 hard strikes against the wooden door. Not polite, not patient. Desperate. Eliza had not seen another person in months. She lived alone on this mountain, 23 years old and already ancient from grief. Her father was dead. Her mother was dead. And she had sworn she would never open that door to strangers again. But through the frost-covered glass, she saw a man swaying in the storm. And in his arms, a boy whose lips had turned blue. Blue like death. She opened the door. What she did not know was that this stranger was hiding a secret worth more than her entire mountain. He was the missing heir to one of the richest families in America. And the most powerful man in the valley was already hunting him. Within days, that same man would come for Eliza too. He would threaten to take everything she had left. Her land, her home, her future. But Eliza Bennett had buried her father with her own bleeding hands. She had survived 17 winters alone. And she was about to prove that the woman everyone dismissed as weak was stronger than any of them ever imagined. Stay until the very end, because this story will show you that the door you are most afraid to open might be the one that changes everything. This story teaches us that real strength is not about standing alone. It is about having the courage to let people in. Sometimes the greatest risk we take is not facing danger, but trusting someone with our heart. The people who knock on our door in the middle of our darkest storms might be the ones who help us finally come home. If this story warmed your soul, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever opened a door you were afraid to open and found something beautiful on the other side? I would love to hear your story. Hit that like button if you believe kindness always finds its way back to you. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that reminds you what love can build. Share this with someone who needs to know that letting people in is not weakness. It is the bravest thing we can do. Eliza Bennett stood at her kitchen window, watching the snow pile against the glass like a white wall trying to bury her alive. The wind screamed through the trees. Ice cracked against the roof. She had lived through 17 winters on this mountain, but this storm felt different. Meaner, somehow. Like it had come specifically for her. The cabin was cold despite the fire. Her father had built this place with his own hands 30 years ago, back when the mountain still promised something to men who worked hard enough. Now the logs were gray and tired. The roof leaked in 3 places. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges, and she had stopped trying to fix it months ago. There was no point. No one was coming to help her. No one ever did. She was 23 years old and already felt ancient. Her mother had died giving birth to her. Her father had followed 2 winters past, coughing blood into his handkerchief until there was nothing left of him but bones and silence. She had buried him herself, digging through frozen ground until her hands bled, because there was no one else to do it. The neighbors 5 miles down the valley never visited. The men from town looked at her with a mixture of pity and something darker, something that made her keep the rifle loaded by the door. A woman alone on a mountain was either prey or a problem, and she refused to be either. She had learned to survive. That was different from living. The stew in her pot was thin, more water than meat. She had trapped a rabbit 3 days ago and stretched it as far as it would go. Her flour was almost gone. Her coffee grounds were weak from being used twice. But she would make it through this storm just like she had made it through all the others. Alone. Always alone. The knock came at 8:30. Eliza froze with the spoon halfway to her mouth. The sound was so unexpected that for a moment she thought she had imagined it. No one came to her cabin, not in winter, not up on this ridge where the trails turned deadly when the snow fell. And certainly never after dark. She set the spoon down slowly. Her heart began to pound. The knock came again. 3 hard strikes against the wooden door. Not polite, not patient, desperate, like someone running out of time. Eliza reached for her father's rifle. The metal was cold against her palms as she lifted it from its place by the hearth. She had fired it exactly twice in her life, both times at wolves circling her chickens, but she knew how to use it if she had to. She crept toward the door, boots silent on the rough plank floor. The wind howled outside like a living thing. Snow hissed against the windows. Through the frost-clouded glass, she could see shapes in the darkness. A man, tall, shoulders bowed against the storm, and something in his arms, something small and still. Her breath caught. The knock came a third time, softer now, almost begging. Eliza's hand tightened on the rifle. She thought about the last strangers who had come to her door. 2 men from the railroad company. They had looked at her patched dress and her empty shelves and laughed. They had eaten her food and warmed themselves by her fire, and ridden off without so much as a thank you, leaving her with nothing but shame and the bitter taste of charity given to those who did not deserve it. She had sworn she would never open that door again, but her father's voice rose in her memory, clear as the sound of the axe he used to carry. Hospitality is not optional in a storm, Eliza girl. You turn away a traveler in weather like this, you might as well pull the trigger yourself. She looked through the glass again. The man had not moved. He stood there swaying slightly, the snow piling on his shoulders, his hat pulled low against the wind. The bundle in his arms was wrapped in a blanket that had gone stiff with ice. It was not moving. Eliza set the rifle down. She opened the door. The cold hit her like a fist. Snow rushed in, biting her ankles, stealing her breath. The man staggered forward, and she saw his face for the first time. Dark eyes, a jaw covered in 3 days of stubble, lines around his mouth that spoke of hard miles and harder choices. He was maybe 30, maybe older. It was impossible to tell beneath the exhaustion. In his arms he held a boy. The child could not have been more than 8 years old. His clothes were fine but worn thin, not made for this kind of weather. His face was pale as milk. His lips were blue, blue like death. "Ma'am," the man said. Just that one word, cracked and dry, like he had carried it across 100 miles of frozen wilderness. "Please." Eliza did not hesitate. "Inside," she said. "By the fire. Now." She grabbed his arm and pulled him through the doorway. He stumbled, nearly fell, caught himself on the back of her chair. Behind him, 2 horses stood in the yard, their heads hanging low, their sides trembling. They were fine animals, she noticed. Good breeding. But they were spent. 1 more mile would have killed them. Eliza slammed the door against the storm. The howling outside dulled to a distant roar. Silence fell heavy in the cabin, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the ragged sound of the man's breathing. He knelt by the hearth without being told. His hands shook as he laid the boy down on the warm stones. The child did not stir. Eliza grabbed the only spare quilt she owned, the one her mother had stitched before dying, and wrapped it around the small body. She felt for a pulse at the boy's throat and found it, weak but there. She checked his hands and feet for frostbite. The fingers were white but not yet black. There was still time. "How long were you out there?" she asked as she worked. The man's voice broke when he answered. "Too long. I lost the trail. The storm came up faster than I expected. I thought I could make it to the next town, but then he started shaking and I could not get him to stop, and I saw your light through the trees and I could not let him die out there. I could not." His words tumbled out in a rush, fear and guilt and something that sounded almost like prayer. Eliza did not respond. She was too focused on the boy, rubbing warmth into his frozen limbs, willing the color back into his cheeks. Minutes passed. The fire crackled. The wind threw itself against the cabin walls like a beast trying to break in. Then the boy stirred. His eyes opened slowly, blue, clear, alive. He looked up at Eliza with confusion and fear, and then his gaze found the man kneeling beside him. "Pa," he whispered. "I am right here, son." The man's voice cracked. "You are safe now. This kind lady saved you." The boy turned his head to look at Eliza. His lips trembled as he tried to form words. "Thank you, miss," he whispered. Something cracked open inside Eliza's chest. A feeling she had not experienced in so long she had forgotten its name. Warmth, connection, purpose. "You are welcome," she said softly. "Now rest. You need to get warm." She stood and moved to the stove, her hand steady even though her heart was racing. She poured weak coffee into 2 chipped cups and ladled stew into bowls. The man, the stranger, watched her with eyes that held no threat. Only gratitude, only disbelief. As if kindness had surprised him. She set the food before him. "Eat," she said. "You look half dead yourself." He shook his head. "The boy first. He has had enough excitement for one night. Let him sleep. You need your strength if you're going to take care of him." The man stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his shoulders loosened, and he picked up the spoon. Eliza sat across from him, watching the fire cast shadows across his weathered face. He ate like a man who had not tasted hot food in days. Maybe longer. When he finished, he looked up at her with those dark eyes, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. They were not just lost. They were running. But from what, she did not ask. And he did not tell her. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the fire burned steady and warm. And Eliza had no idea that this night, this single act of opening her door to strangers, would change the course of her entire life. Eliza woke before dawn to the sound of breathing that was not her own. For a moment she lay still in her narrow bed, confused. The cabin was dark except for the glow of embers in the hearth. Snow still whispered against the windows. The storm had not passed, but it had gentled, settling into the steady patience of a winter that knew it had time. Then she remembered. The knock. The stranger. The boy with blue lips and eyes that had opened to meet hers. She rose quietly, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders against the morning chill. The cold floor bit at her bare feet as she crossed to the main room. The man sat beside the fire exactly where she had left him hours ago. He had not slept. His eyes were fixed on the boy curled beneath her mother's quilt, watching over him like a treasure that might be stolen if he looked away. "Morning," Eliza said softly. He looked up, nodded, said nothing. She moved to the kitchen area and began mixing what little flour she had left, stretching it into biscuits. A jar of preserved plum jam sat nearly empty on the shelf. Her coffee grounds were so thin they barely colored the water. But she made do. She always made do. The man rose and came to stand beside her without being asked. His hands were steady as he took over stirring the pot she had started. His movements were practiced, efficient. This was a man who knew how to work. "You do not have to do that," she said. "I do," he replied simply. "You saved our lives. The least I can do is earn my keep." They worked in silence, moving around each other in the small space like they had done it 100 times before. It should have felt strange having a stranger in her kitchen. Instead, it felt almost natural, like a missing piece sliding into place. The boy woke as the biscuits finished baking. He sat up slowly, blinking at the unfamiliar walls, and for a moment panic flashed across his face. Then he saw his father, and his shoulders relaxed. "Where are we?" he asked. "Safe," the man said. "For now." "Might I have a biscuit, miss?" the boy asked. His words were careful, polite in a way that did not match the trail. This was not a child raised in barns and bunkhouses. This was a boy who had been taught manners by someone who valued them. "All you want," Eliza said. She watched them eat, noticing things she'd been too tired to see the night before. The man's coat was worn thin, but every stitch was precise. Expensive tailoring, even beneath the dirt and damage. The boy's hands were soft, his fingernails clean despite days on the trail. These were not ordinary drifters. And then there were the horses. She had brought them into the barn during the night, unable to leave good animals suffering in the cold. Even covered in mud and snow, she could see they were fine stock, the kind of horses rich men rode, the kind that cost more than her cabin and everything in it. I am Samuel, the boy said suddenly, breaking the silence. He extended his hand across the rough wooden table like a little gentleman. This is my paw. His name is Daniel. The man, Daniel, looked almost embarrassed. He reached out and shook Eliza's hand. His grip was calloused but gentle, worn by work but not rough with it. Eliza, she said. Eliza Bennett. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Bennett, Daniel said, and thank you. What you did last night, taking us in like that. Most people would not have done it. Most people do not live alone on a mountain, she replied. You learned quick that the only help coming is the help you give yourself. A shadow passed across Daniel's face. Or the help strangers offer, he said quietly. She did not know what he meant by that. She did not ask. The day passed in a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Daniel split wood until the pile beside the cabin doubled. His axe strokes fell steady and sure, echoing through the valley with a sound Eliza had not heard since her father died. Each strike resonated in her chest, filling a silence she had not realized was so deep. Samuel darted around the yard between chores, laughing at the chickens, building snow forts, pressing his face against the barn door to talk to the horses. He had a brightness about him that seemed impossible after the night before. Children were resilient that way. They bounced back from the edge of death like it was just another adventure. By evening, the cabin felt different. Warmer, not just from the fire, but from the voices that filled spaces that had held only echoes for so long. Eliza had not realized how heavy the silence had been until it was gone. Your father raised you right, Daniel said over supper. The way you handle yourself, the way you keep this place running alone. He must have been proud. He raised me alone, Eliza replied. Mama died when I was born. It was just us for as long as I can remember. Daniel nodded slowly. Same with Samuel, he said. His mother passed when he was 4. The words settled between them like stones dropped into still water. Shared grief. Shared understanding. Samuel looked up from his plate, his young face suddenly serious. I remember her a little, he said. She smelled like flowers, and she used to sing to me at night. Eliza felt her throat tighten. My mother made this quilt, she said, gesturing to the blanket still wrapped around Samuel's shoulders. She stitched it while she was carrying me. My father said she wanted to make sure I had something warm to hold after she was gone. Samuel pulled the quilt tighter around himself. He did not say anything. He did not have to. Later that night, while Daniel checked on the horses, Eliza hung his coat to dry by the fire. Something slipped from the pocket and clattered against the floor. She bent to pick it up and felt her heart stop. It was a pocket watch, gold, heavy in her palm, the kind of watch that cost more than most men earned in a year. The case was engraved with initials she could not read in the dim light, but she did not need to. She knew what this meant. This was not a drifter's watch. This was not a cowboy's possession. This was the watch of a wealthy man. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind racing. 1,000 questions flooded through her. Who was he really? What was he running from? Why would a man with a watch like this be riding through a mountain blizzard with a young boy half frozen and desperate? She heard his footsteps on the porch. Quickly, she tucked the watch back into his coat pocket and stepped away. When Daniel came through the door, brushing snow from his shoulders, she was standing by the fire with her hands folded, her face carefully blank. Horses are settled, he said. That mare of yours has a good temperament, calm even in the storm. She has to be, Eliza replied. Living up here, you cannot afford an animal that panics. Daniel nodded. He moved to check on Samuel, who had fallen asleep in the chair by the hearth. The boy's face was peaceful now, all trace of last night's terror gone. How far were you headed? Eliza asked, keeping her voice casual. Far enough, Daniel said without turning around. Storm is not done. She looked out the window at the white world beyond. Trails will not clear for days. Maybe longer. He stiffened. We cannot stay. You have already done too much. You cannot ride, she said firmly. Your horses are spent. Your boy nearly froze. You go out there now, you will not make it 5 miles before he collapses again. Pride and need warred behind his eyes. She recognized that struggle. She had felt it herself, every time she had to accept help that felt like charity. Finally, he exhaled. 3 days, he said, just until the trail's clear. 3 days, she agreed. Samuel stirred in his sleep and smiled. Just a small smile, careful and shy. But it was there. That night, Eliza lay awake in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. She could hear Daniel breathing in the main room, still keeping watch over his son. Still standing guard against threats she could not see. She thought about the gold watch hidden in his coat. She thought about the fine horses in her barn. She thought about the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way Samuel said please and thank you like they were prayers. These men were not who they seemed to be, but then again, neither was she. She was not just a poor mountain girl surviving alone. She was a woman who had buried her father with her own bleeding hands. She was a woman who had faced down wolves and winter and loneliness that could crush a soul. She was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. And whatever secrets Daniel was carrying, she had a feeling they would not change what mattered most. He was a father who loved his son enough to ride through a killing storm. And she was a woman who opened her door to strangers when the easier thing would have been to let them freeze. Some truths were simple enough. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. Outside, the storm continued, but inside the cabin, for the first time in 2 years, Eliza did not feel alone. The 3 days stretched into 4, then 5. The storm did not care about their plans. Eliza found she did not mind. Daniel worked from sunrise to sunset, fixing everything that had broken in the years since her father died. The barn door hung straight for the first time in memory. The fence posts stood firm. The leak in the roof disappeared under his careful hands. He did not ask permission. He simply saw what needed doing and did it. She watched him from the kitchen window, her hands busy with bread dough, her mind somewhere else entirely. There was something hypnotic about the way he moved. Steady, purposeful. Like a man who had learned that the only way through hardship was to put one foot in front of the other and keep going. Samuel filled the spaces between with laughter. He chased the chickens until they squawked in protest. He named each one of them, silly names like Princess Featherbutt and Lord Cluxalot, that made Eliza laugh despite herself. He asked 1,000 questions about the mountain, about the animals, about her life up here alone. "Were you ever scared?" he asked one afternoon while helping her gather eggs. "All the time," she admitted. "But scared and stuck are 2 different things. I learned to be scared and keep moving anyway." Samuel nodded solemnly, like she had shared a great wisdom. "My pa says the same thing," he said. "He says courage is not about not being scared. It is about being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. Your pa is a smart man." Samuel beamed. "He is the smartest man in the whole world." Eliza smiled, but something tugged at her heart. The boy adored his father. That much was clear in every glance, every word, every time he reached for Daniel's hand. But there was fear there, too, a shadow that crossed his face when he thought no one was looking, like he was waiting for something bad to happen. "What are you running from?" she wanted to ask. But she did not. Some questions were better left unspoken. On the 5th night, the storm finally broke. The sky cleared to reveal 1,000,000 stars scattered across black velvet like diamonds thrown by a careless hand. The snow sparkled under the moonlight, and for one perfect moment the whole world felt clean and new. Daniel stood on the porch, staring up at those stars. Eliza came to stand beside him, 2 cups of coffee steaming in her hands. She offered one to him without speaking. He took it the same way. "Beautiful," he said finally. "It is," she agreed. "I used to sit out here with my father, counting stars, until I fell asleep. He would carry me inside and tuck me into bed, and I would dream about all the places those stars might be shining on." "Do you still dream about those places?" She was quiet for a moment. "Not anymore," she said. Somewhere along the way, I stopped dreaming about leaving and started dreaming about staying, about making this place into something worth having. Daniel turned to look at her. His face was half shadow, half starlight. "That is not a small thing," he said. "Having something worth staying for." "Do you?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Have something worth staying for?" The question hung in the cold air between them. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked away, back at the stars. "I thought I did once," he said quietly. "A life, a wife, a future that seemed certain. Then she died, and everything I thought I knew fell apart. I spent the last 4 years trying to find something to replace it, running from place to place, looking for answers that never came." "What happened?" He exhaled slowly. "I realized I was looking in the wrong direction. I was trying to go back to what I had lost instead of forward to what I could build." Eliza felt the words settle into her chest like stones. She knew that feeling. The desperate clinging to the past because the future seemed too empty to bear. The slow realization that nothing would bring back what was gone. "And now," she asked, "what are you building now?" Daniel turned to face her fully. His eyes were dark and serious. "I do not know yet," he admitted. "But standing here tonight under these stars, in a place where someone was kind enough to open their door to a stranger." He paused. "This is the first time in 4 years I have not wanted to keep running." Eliza's heart pounded. She did not know what to say. She did not know what this feeling was, this warmth spreading through her chest like summer sunshine in the middle of winter. Before she could find the words, the door creaked open behind them. Samuel stood there in his night clothes, rubbing his eyes. "I had a bad dream," he said, his voice small and scared. Daniel moved instantly, kneeling to gather his son into his arms. "I am here," he murmured. "I am right here, right. Nothing is going to hurt you." "Can Miss Eliza sing me a song?" Samuel asked, his face pressed against his father's shoulder. "Like Mama used to?" Eliza froze. She had not sung in years, not since her father died. Her voice felt rusty, unused, like a door that had been shut too long. But Samuel looked at her with those blue eyes, so full of trust and hope, and she could not refuse. "Come inside," she said softly. "Let me see what I remember." She sang him an old lullaby her father used to sing, a song about rivers and mountains and stars that watched over sleeping children. Her voice cracked on the high notes and wavered on the low ones, but Samuel did not seem to notice. He lay in his makeshift bed by the fire, clutching her mother's quilt, his eyes growing heavy. By the time she finished, he was asleep. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching her with an expression she could not read. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded, not trusting her voice. That night, something shifted between them. A wall came down, a door opened. Neither of them spoke of it, but they both felt it. And when Eliza finally fell asleep, she dreamed of stars again for the first time in years. The next morning, the trail down the mountain was clear. The horses were rested. There was no reason left to stay. Samuel stood on the porch, tears streaming down his face. "Can we not stay longer, Paul? Please? I like it here. I like Miss Eliza." Daniel knelt to meet his son's eyes. "So do I, son," he said gently. "But we have already imposed enough." Eliza watched from the doorway, her heart caught in her throat. She should let them go. She knew that. They had their lives. She had hers. They were strangers, really. Strangers who had shared a few days in a storm. But then Samuel looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that broke her heart. Hope. Desperate, fragile hope. The hope of a child who had lost his mother and found something in Eliza that he could not bear to lose again. She heard herself speak before she knew what she was saying. "Your horse threw a shoe," she blurted out. "I noticed it this morning. You cannot ride her until it is fixed." Daniel looked up, surprised. He had checked the horses himself just an hour ago. But then he saw the look on Samuel's face, the desperate, pleading hope. He checked the mare's hooves again, made a show of examining them carefully. "You are right," he said finally. "Must have happened overnight. One more day while we fix it." Samuel let out a whoop of joy and threw his arms around Eliza's waist. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," he cried. Eliza hugged him back, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and little boy. Just one more day, she told herself. She had no idea how much that lie would cost her, or how much it would save. One more day became two. Two became a week. No one mentioned leaving anymore. The cabin settled into a rhythm that felt almost like family. Daniel rose at dawn and worked until dusk. Samuel helped with the chickens and the horses, and 100 small tasks he invented for himself. Eliza cooked and cleaned and found herself humming while she worked, something she had not done since before her father died. At night, they gathered around the table and talked. Daniel told stories about cattle drives and frontier towns, careful tales that never quite revealed where he came from or why he left. Samuel shared dreams of the adventures he wanted to have when he grew up. Eliza listened more than she spoke. But when she did talk, both of them listened like her words mattered. It was dangerous, this feeling, this warmth, this sense of belonging that she had not felt in so long. She tried to ignore it, tried to remind herself that they would leave eventually, that this was temporary, that she should not let herself get attached. But every time Samuel called her Miss Eliza with that bright smile, every time Daniel's eyes met hers across the fire, every time she heard their voices filling the spaces that had been silent for so long, she felt herself falling deeper into something she could not name. And then Lucas came. It was late evening, the sun already gone behind the ridge when she heard the hooves, not one horse, several, moving fast and careless through the snow. Eliza felt her stomach drop. Daniel was at the window instantly, his body tense, his hand reaching for the rifle by the door. "Get inside," he said quietly to Samuel. "Stay away from the windows. Pa, what is happening?" "Just do as I say, son." The boy obeyed, scrambling to hide behind the big chair by the hearth. Eliza moved to stand beside Daniel, her heart pounding. Through the frost-covered glass, she saw them. 3 riders. Torchlight flickering orange against the snow. The lead horse was black and gleaming, its rider sitting tall in the saddle like he owned the land beneath him. She knew that horse. She knew that rider. "Lucas Blackwood," she breathed. "You know him?" Daniel asked, his voice low. She nodded, her jaw tight. "He is the reason half this valley is gone. His father ran the bank. When he died, Lucas took over everything. The bank, the railroad contracts, the land speculation. He has been trying to buy my land for 2 years. Why? Railroad is coming through. My property sits right in the path they want. He has tried everything. Threats, bribes, manipulation." She paused. "Now he is trying patience, waiting for me to fail so he can sweep in and take what he wants." The riders entered the yard. Lucas dismounted without invitation, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. He wore a fine wool coat, too expensive for this country, and a smile that never reached his eyes. "Well now," he called out. "Did not expect company up here." Eliza stepped onto the porch, keeping her back straight and her chin high. "You have no business here, Lucas." He tipped his hat in a mockery of manners. "Just checking on you. Storm hit hard. Wanted to make sure my favorite neighbor survived. I am not your neighbor." Details. His eyes slid past her to the doorway where Daniel stood silent and watchful. And who might this be? "Guests," Eliza said shortly. Lucas's smile widened. He studied Daniel with the cold calculation of a man measuring threats. "Interesting," he said. "Do not see many guests up here. Road is treacherous this time of year. A man would have to be desperate or lost to end up on this ridge. Or hospitable, Daniel said. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the words, something that made Lucas's horse shift nervously. Lucas noticed. His smile thinned. "Careful who you take in," he said to Eliza. "Folk talk. A woman alone letting strange men stay in her cabin could give people ideas." "Get off my land," Eliza snapped. Lucas held up his hands in mock surrender. "Just friendly advice." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Railroad meeting is next week. They are looking for signatures. People who will not sign are finding life around here getting complicated. My answer has not changed. Answers can change. Circumstances can change." He glanced pointedly at Daniel, then back at her. "Banknotes coming due soon. Be a shame if something happened to complicate that." Eliza felt the threat like a blade against her throat. Her father had taken out a loan years ago, before he got sick, planning to expand the farm. She had been paying it off slowly, painfully, every spare penny going to that debt. If Lucas called it in early, she would lose everything. "That is enough," Daniel said. He stepped forward, just enough to matter. His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of a man who was done listening. Lucas studied him for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe? Or suspicion. "And you are?" Lucas asked. "Leaving," Daniel replied. "As soon as you do." The tension stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. Lucas's two men shifted on their horses, hands drifting toward their holsters. Eliza's heart pounded. Then Lucas laughed, short and hollow. "Smart man," he said. "I like smart men. They know when to step aside." He mounted his horse in one smooth motion. "Think on my offer, Eliza. Time is running out." He wheeled his horse and rode off into the darkness, his men following close behind. Silence fell over the yard. The torchlight faded. The sound of hooves disappeared down the mountain. Eliza released a breath she did not know she had been holding. "Who was that?" Samuel asked from the doorway, his voice small and scared. "No one," Daniel said. "Go back inside, son." "He was lying," Samuel protested. "I could tell. He was a bad man." Daniel knelt and gathered his son into his arms. "Yes," he said quietly. "He was. But he is gone now, and we are safe." Eliza watched them, her heart aching. This was her fight, her land, her debt. She had no right to drag them into it. That night, after Samuel fell asleep, she sat across from Daniel at the table. The fire had burned low. Shadows danced on the walls. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Tell me who you really are." Daniel met her eyes. There was pain there, old and deep. "I am trying to do right," he said. "That is all I can tell you. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." The words cut deeper than she expected. She had opened her home to him. She had let him into her life, into the spaces her father had left empty, and he could not even give her honesty in return. "Then leave," she said. Her voice cracked. "Tomorrow, take your son and go." "Eliza, no." She stood, turning away so he would not see the tears burning in her eyes. "I cannot do this. I cannot worry about Lucas and his threats and wonder every day if you are going to bring more trouble down on my head. I have survived alone before. I can do it again." Daniel did not move. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they were not saying. Then Samuel appeared in the doorway. His face was streaked with tears, his eyes red from crying. "Miss Eliza," he whispered, "please, please do not make us leave." The words broke something inside her. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." She turned and walked to her room. She closed the door. And she did not come out until morning, when the sound of hooves told her they were already gone. Eliza did not watch them go. She stayed in her room listening to the sounds of packing, Samuel's quiet sobs, Daniel's gentle murmurs. The creak of the barn door opening, the horses being led out, every sound was a knife in her heart. She heard Samuel's voice, broken and pleading. "We cannot leave her, Pa. She needs us." And Daniel's response, soft and sad. "She asked us to go, son. We have to respect that." Those words destroyed her. She slid down the wall and sat on the cold floor, her back against the rough logs, her face buried in her hands. She wept like she had not wept since her father died. Great, shaking sobs that tore through her body and left her hollow. The hooves faded down the trail. Gone. Hours passed. The sun climbed. The cabin fell silent again. But this time the silence was not familiar. It was not the quiet companion she had learned to live with. It was an emptiness. A void where something precious had lived for a few brief days. She forced herself to rise, to wash her face, to eat something even though food tasted like ash. She was standing at the window, staring at nothing, when the knock came. Her heart leaped. Daniel? But when she opened the door, it was not Daniel standing there. It was old Jonah Miller, her nearest neighbor, 5 miles down the valley. He held his hat in his weathered hands, his face creased with concern. "Saw them ride out," he said without preamble. "Figured you should know something." Eliza blinked, confused. "Know what?" "That man," Jonah said. "The one with the boy. His name is Daniel Harrington." The name meant nothing to her. She shook her head. "Harrington," Jonah repeated. "As in Harrington Pacific Railroad, as in the richest family in 3 territories." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" Jonah stepped inside, lowering his voice even though there was no one to hear. His father built half the railroads west of the Mississippi. When the old man died 5 years back, Daniel was set to inherit everything. Then his wife took sick and passed. They say he went mad with grief, walked away from it all. Took the boy and disappeared. Family has been looking for him ever since. Eliza sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly weak. The gold watch. The fine horses. The way Samuel spoke with such careful manners, it all made sense now. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because Lucas knows," Jonah said grimly. "He figured it out somehow. He is planning to expose Daniel at the town meeting tonight. Going to announce it to everyone. Call him out as a fraud and a coward. And once the family knows where Daniel is, they will send men, lawyers, pressure. They will make his life hell, and anyone connected to him." Eliza's blood ran cold. "Tonight?" "Town square at sundown. Lucas has been bragging about it all morning. Says he is going to prove that Harrington Air is nothing but a runaway hiding behind a widow's skirts." The word widow stung, but Eliza ignored it. Her mind was racing. Daniel had lied to her. He had hidden who he was. But he had also worked her land with his own 2 hands. He had fixed her barn and her fence and her roof. He had treated her with respect and kindness. And Samuel, that sweet boy who called her Miss Eliza with such hope in his eyes, had done nothing wrong. They were in danger, and it was partially her fault for sending them away. She stood abruptly. "I need a horse," she said. "Eliza," Jonah started. "My mare is in the barn. Can she make it to town before sundown?" Jonah studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "If you push her hard enough," he said. "But the trail is still treacherous. One wrong step, and you will both go over the edge. Then I will not take any wrong steps." She did not wait for his response. She was already running to the barn. The ride down the mountain was brutal. Ice hid beneath fresh snow, invisible death traps, waiting to send her tumbling into the ravine. Her mare stumbled twice, and both times Eliza's heart stopped. But she pushed on, urging the horse faster, ignoring the cold that bit through her thin coat. This time she was not running away. This time she was running toward something. The town lights came into view as the sun touched the horizon, orange and gold glowing against the purple twilight. A crowd had gathered in the square. More people than usually came out on a winter evening. They huddled together, breath misting in the cold air, faces turned toward the raised platform, where Lucas Blackwood stood like a king addressing his subjects. And there, at the edge of the crowd, stood Daniel. His shoulders were slumped. Samuel clung to his hand, face pale with fear. They were surrounded, outnumbered, alone. "Well now," Lucas's voice rang out across the square. "Glad everyone could make it. I promised you all a show, and I aim to deliver." Eliza kicked her mare into a gallop. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lucas continued, gesturing dramatically, "may I present to you Daniel Harrington. Yes, that Harrington, heir to the Harrington Pacific Railroad fortune, hiding out in our little town like a common vagrant." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, heads turned, eyes widened. "This man," Lucas said, his voice dripping with contempt, "walked away from his responsibilities, abandoned his family name, and has been living like a beggar, dragging his poor son through the wilderness, all because he could not handle the weight of his inheritance." Eliza's mare burst into the square. People scattered, someone screamed. She pulled back on the reins and the horse reared, hooves pawing the air. She dismounted before the animal had fully stopped, stumbling through the mud, pushing through the crowd until she stood between Lucas and Daniel. "Stop," she commanded. Lucas's eyes narrowed. "Well, if it is not our mountain hermit, come to defend your house guest?" Eliza's chest heaved. She was disheveled, her hair wild, her clothes mud-splattered. She looked nothing like a proper lady, but her voice was steady. "Say what you want about me," she said. "But this man is good. This man worked my land with his own 2 hands. He fixed my barn and my fence and my roof. He treated me with kindness when he had nothing to gain from it." She turned to face the crowd. Every face she had known since childhood, every neighbor who had watched her struggle and never lifted a finger to help. "I do not care who his family is," she said. "I care who he is. And he is a good father who loves his son more than anything in this world. That is worth more than any fortune." Silence fell over the square. Daniel stepped forward, his voice quiet but clear. "I hid my name," he said, "but I never hid my hands. I worked because work needed doing. I helped because help was needed. If that makes me a coward, so be it." He looked at Eliza, and something passed between them. Understanding, gratitude, something deeper. Lucas laughed, but the sound was forced. His confidence was cracking. "How touching," he sneered. "A runaway and a spinster pretending they matter." He turned to the crowd. "You really want to trust this man? He will bring his family's lawyers down on all of us. He will bring trouble to your doors." "No," Eliza said. "The only trouble here is you." The crowd shifted. Whispers spread. And Eliza realized, for the first time in her life, that she was not alone in this fight. Not anymore. The confrontation hung in the cold night air like smoke from a dying fire. Lucas stood on the platform, his fine coat gleaming in the torchlight, his face twisted with barely contained rage. He was not used to being challenged, not in his own town, not by a woman he had dismissed as a nuisance. Eliza stood her ground. Daniel came to stand beside her, Samuel clutching his hand. The boy was trembling, but he did not cry. He watched Eliza with wide eyes full of something that looked like wonder. The crowd had grown restless. People muttered to each other, glancing between Lucas and the 3 figures who had suddenly become the center of attention. Old loyalties warred with new doubts. A man from the railroad company stepped forward, papers clutched in his gloved hand. He was thin and gray, the kind of man who counted money instead of living life. His eyes were cold as he surveyed the scene. "This is all very dramatic," he said dryly. "But drama does not pay the bills." He looked at Eliza. "You have banknotes coming due. Lucas here tells me you cannot pay." Eliza's stomach clenched. It was true. The loan her father had taken was a noose around her neck, tightening with every passing month. She had been scraping by, selling eggs and vegetables and preserved fruit. But it was never enough. Never quite enough. Lucas smirked. Time to face facts. Sign the papers and walk away with something. Fight me, and you walk away with nothing. Daniel moved before Eliza could respond. He reached into his coat, the same coat where she had found the gold watch, and pulled out a folded document. He stepped past Eliza, past Lucas, and handed the papers directly to the railroad man. "What is this?" Lucas demanded. "A counteroffer," Daniel said calmly. "The land stays. The railroad reroutes through the East Pass. It is a longer route by 12 miles, but the terrain is better, less chance of avalanches blocking the tracks." The railroad man unfolded the papers. His eyes scanned the contents, widening slightly. "This is," he started. "A legal proposal," Daniel finished, "backed by enough funds to cover the difference in construction costs." Lucas's face went white. "Where did you get that kind of money? You walked away from your family." "I walked away from their expectations," Daniel said. "Not from the inheritance my wife left me. She came from money, too. Good money, earned honestly. I kept it in trust for Samuel. But I will spend every penny of it before I let a man like you destroy what Eliza has built." The crowd erupted in whispers. Even Eliza stared at Daniel in shock. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were soft. "I wanted you free," he said quietly. "Not because I expected anything in return, just because you deserve it." The railroad man coughed, drawing attention back to himself. "This proposal is unorthodox," he said slowly. "But it is valid. The numbers work." He looked at Lucas. "The company has no legal grounds to force the original route." Lucas sputtered. "You cannot be serious." "I am always serious about money." The man tucked the papers into his coat. "I will present this to my superiors. In the meantime, any further pressure on Miss Bennett would be inadvisable." He tipped his hat and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Lucas stood alone on the platform, his power slipping away like water through his fingers, his face twisted with fury. "This is not over," he hissed. "Yes, it is," Daniel said. He stepped forward, close enough that only Lucas could hear his next words. "You threatened someone I care about. You scared my son. That is a debt I do not forget." Lucas's bravado cracked. For a moment, fear flickered in his eyes. Then he turned and stalked away, shoving through the crowd, his 2 hired men hurrying after him. Silence fell over the square. Samuel was the first to break it. "Does this mean we can stay, Pa?" Daniel looked down at his son, then at Eliza. "I do not know," he said honestly. "That is up to Miss Eliza." Every eye in the square turned to her. Eliza's heart pounded. She thought about everything that had happened. The storm, the knock on her door, the days of warmth and laughter and belonging, the pain of sending them away, the terror of riding down the mountain to save them. She thought about living alone again, going back to the silence, surviving instead of living. And she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that she could not do it, would not do it. "You are staying," she said. Samuel let out a whoop of joy and threw himself at her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Eliza hugged him back, tears streaming down her face. Daniel stood watching, his expression unreadable. "We should talk," he said quietly, "about everything, about who I really am." "I know who you are," Eliza replied. "You are a man who rode through a blizzard to save his son. A man who worked my land without being asked. A man who spent his wife's inheritance to free me from debt." She met his eyes. "That is who you are. The rest is just details." Something broke open in Daniel's face. Relief, gratitude. Something that looked like the first stirrings of love. The crowd began to disperse, people drifting away in 2s and 3s, whispering to each other about what they had witnessed. Some looked at Eliza with new respect, others looked ashamed. Old Jonah appeared at her elbow. "That was something," he said gruffly. "Your father would have been proud." Eliza smiled through her tears. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "Truth has a way of coming out," Jonah said. He tipped his hat to Daniel. "Take care of her, mister. She is the best of us." He walked away without waiting for a response. The 3 of them stood alone in the empty square. The torches had burned low. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Let us go home," Samuel said, tugging at Eliza's hand. Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. "Yes," Eliza said, "let us go home." They walked to where the horses waited. Daniel helped Samuel mount first, then turned to Eliza. "I am sorry," he said, "for not telling you sooner, for putting you in danger." "You did not put me in danger." She touched his arm, feeling the warmth of him through the worn fabric. "Lucas was my problem long before you arrived. Maybe, but you are not facing him alone anymore." She smiled. "No, I am not." They mounted their horses and began the long ride back up the mountain. The trail was dark and treacherous, but somehow it did not seem as frightening as before. Not with Daniel riding beside her. Not with Samuel chattering happily about all the things he wanted to do when they got home. Home. For the first time in 2 years, Eliza was going home to something more than an empty cabin and endless silence. She was going home to family. Spring came slowly to the mountain. The snow retreated in patches, revealing brown earth and stubborn grass that had survived beneath the ice. Water ran in narrow streams down the slope, cold and fast, filling the air with the sound of life returning. Daniel built. He added a second room to the cabin, proper walls with tight joints that kept out the wind. He reinforced the barn until it could withstand any storm. He built a fence that would last decades, each post sunk deep into the mountain soil. Eliza watched him work and marveled at the change in herself. She had spent so long surviving alone, convincing herself she did not need anyone. Now she woke each morning to the sound of Daniel's hammer and Samuel's laughter, and the cabin felt fuller than it ever had, even when her father was alive. Samuel thrived. His cough disappeared. Color returned to his cheeks. He grew taller and stronger, running wild across the mountain like he had been born there. He named every animal on the farm, learned to saddle his own horse, and talked constantly about everything and nothing. And somewhere along the way, without anyone making a decision about it, he stopped calling Eliza Miss. "Ma," he said one morning, running into the kitchen with his arms full of wildflowers, "look what I found." Eliza froze. The word hit her like a lightning bolt, stopping her heart and restarting it in the same instant. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Samuel looked up at her, confused. "I said, look what I found. They are for you." "No." She knelt down to meet his eyes. "Before that, you called me something." Understanding dawned on his face. He looked suddenly shy, uncertain. "Is that okay? I know you are not my real ma, but you feel like one. You feel like home." Eliza pulled him into her arms and held him tight, tears streaming down her face. "It is more than okay," she whispered. "It is perfect." Daniel found them like that a few minutes later, Eliza crying and laughing at the same time while Samuel patted her back awkwardly. "Everything all right?" he asked. Eliza looked up at him, her face glowing with a joy she had never expected to feel. "Everything is wonderful," she said. That night, after Samuel fell asleep by the hearth, Daniel and Eliza sat together on the porch. The sky was clear and full of stars, the same stars they had watched together months ago when everything was uncertain. "He started calling you that on his own," Daniel said quietly. "I did not ask him to." "I know. He lost his mother so young, I worried he would forget what it meant to have one." Daniel paused. "But you showed him. You showed both of us." Eliza leaned against his shoulder. "I was so scared to let you in," she admitted. "After my father died, I told myself I would never need anyone again, that needing people just meant getting hurt when they left. And now, I am still scared." She looked up at him. "But I am more scared of going back to who I was before you knocked on my door." Daniel turned to face her. In the starlight, his face was half shadow, half hope. "I want to do this right," he said. "Not borrowed time, not hiding. I want to build something real with you. So do I." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the gold watch she had found all those months ago. He opened it, revealing a small photograph inside. A woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "My wife," he said. "Sarah. She made me promise before she died that I would find happiness again, that I would not let grief be my whole story." Eliza looked at the photograph, at the woman who had loved this man before her. "She seems like she was wonderful," Eliza said. "She was. And she would have liked you." Daniel closed the watch and tucked it away. "I have been carrying her memory like a weight. But lately it feels different. It feels like a blessing instead of a burden." Eliza took his hand. "She would want you to be happy." "I know." He squeezed her fingers. "And I am. For the first time in 4 years, I am actually happy." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Then Daniel spoke again. "I will not stay if you do not want me to," he said. "I have already taken enough from you. The debt, the trouble with Lucas, all of it. If you want us to go, I will understand." Eliza turned to look at him fully. "Daniel Harrington," she said firmly, "I sent you away once because I was scared. I rode down a mountain in the dark to bring you back. Do you really think I'm going to let you leave now?" A smile spread across his face, slow and warm. "No," he admitted. "I do not suppose you would." "Then stop asking." "Yes, ma'am." She laughed, and he laughed with her, and the sound echoed across the mountain like a promise. The days grew longer. The garden began to sprout. Life returned to the ridge in 1,000 small ways. And every morning, Eliza woke to the sound of people she loved, and she knew that she had finally found what her father always talked about: a life worth fighting for, a family worth keeping, a love that had walked in from a storm and decided to stay. Summer came with heat and promise. The garden overflowed. The chickens laid more eggs than Eliza knew what to do with. Samuel grew another inch, his pants suddenly too short, his appetite suddenly bottomless. And Lucas Blackwood came back. He did not come alone this time. 2 men rode with him, armed and hard-eyed. They were not the soft hired hands he had brought before. These men had the look of mercenaries, the kind who did ugly work for money and did not ask questions. Eliza saw them coming from the window. Her stomach dropped. Her stomach. "Daniel!" she called. He was there in an instant, one hand on her shoulder, his eyes tracking the riders as they entered the yard. "Take Samuel inside," he said quietly. "Stay away from the windows." "No." She stood her ground. "This is my land. My fight." "Our land," Daniel corrected. "Our fight." Samuel appeared in the doorway, his young face pale with fear. "Is it the bad man again?" "Yes," Eliza said. "But we are not going to let him win." Lucas dismounted with a flourish, his fine boots hitting the dirt with a thud. He looked different than before, harder. The charm had burned away, leaving only the greed beneath. "Thought about your offer," he called out. "Decided I do not accept." "Then why are you here?" Daniel asked. Lucas smiled, cold and sharp. "Railroad meeting is tomorrow, last chance for signatures. I am here to make sure you understand what happens if you do not cooperate." "We are not signing anything," Eliza said. Lucas shook his head, mock sad. "Figured you would say that." He snapped his fingers and his 2 men dismounted, hands resting on their pistols. "Thing is, I have been patient, I have been generous, but patience runs out." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That land deal of yours fell through," he said to Daniel. "Your counteroffer?" "The railroad rejected it. Seems someone convinced them it was not worth the trouble." He smiled. "Someone with the right connections." Eliza felt Daniel stiffen beside her. "You are lying," Daniel said. "Am I?" Lucas pulled a paper from his coat and held it up. "Official notice, counteroffer rejected, original route confirmed. Your lady friend here has until tomorrow to sign, or the bank calls in her debt and takes everything." "No," Eliza whispered. Lucas laughed. "Should have taken my first offer. Would have walked away with something. Now?" He shrugged. "Now you walk away with nothing." Daniel moved so fast, Eliza barely saw it. 1 second, he was standing beside her. The next, he had crossed the yard and grabbed Lucas by the collar of his fine wool coat. The two hired men reached for their guns, but Daniel already had Lucas between himself and them. "Listen carefully," Daniel said, his voice deadly quiet. "I have spent 4 years running from my family, from my name, from everything I used to be, but I never forgot who I am. And I never forgot what I am capable of when someone threatens the people I love." Lucas's smug expression cracked. Fear flickered in his eyes. "Your family cannot help you here," he spat. "You are alone." Daniel smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "That is where you are wrong," he said. "I may have walked away from the Harrington fortune, but I did not walk away from the Harrington lawyers." "What?" Daniel released him and stepped back. "I sent word to my family 3 weeks ago, told them everything, where I have been, what I have been doing, and what you have been up to. You are bluffing." "Am I?" Daniel pulled another paper from his pocket, different from Lucas's. This one bore an official seal. "Counteroffer reinstated," he said. "Approved by the railroad board this morning. Your connections, it seems, are not as strong as mine." Lucas grabbed the paper and read it, his face going white. "This cannot be right." "It is right." Daniel's voice was hard. "My family does not like me much, but they like being made fools of even less. When they heard what you were trying to pull, using their name and their influence for your petty schemes, they were happy to put a stop to it." The hired men exchanged uncertain glances. Their employer was crumbling before their eyes, and nobody wanted to be on the losing side of a fight with the Harrington family. "This is not over," Lucas hissed. "Yes, it is." Eliza stepped forward, her voice steady. "You have been trying to take what is mine for 2 years, threatening me, manipulating me, treating me like I was weak because I was alone." She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. "I was never weak," she said. "I was patient. And now? Now I have something you will never understand." "What is that?" "Family." Lucas looked from Eliza to Daniel to Samuel, who had crept out onto the porch and stood watching with wide eyes. He saw what they had built. He saw the bond between them, unbreakable and fierce. And he knew he had lost. "This is a mistake," he snarled. "You will regret this." "The only mistake," Daniel said, "was yours, for thinking you could win against people who have nothing left to lose." Lucas mounted his horse and rode away without another word. His men followed, disappearing down the mountain trail like shadows fleeing the dawn. Silence fell over the yard. Then Samuel let out a whoop and ran to throw his arms around both Daniel and Eliza. "We won," he cried. "We actually won." Eliza hugged him tight, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "We won." Daniel stood beside them, his hand resting on Eliza's shoulder. "It is really over," he said softly. "We are free." Eliza looked up at him, at this man who had walked into her life on a frozen night and changed everything. "Yes," she said, "we are." The sun was setting behind the ridge, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The mountain had never looked more beautiful. And Eliza knew with absolute certainty that the best part of her life was just beginning. They married in autumn, when the leaves had turned to fire and the mountain air was crisp with the promise of winter. There was no grand ceremony, no crowd of witnesses. Just the 3 of them, old Jonah standing as their witness, and the endless sky stretched above them like a blessing. Eliza wore her mother's dress, let out at the seams to fit her changing body. She had not told Daniel yet about the secret she carried, the new life growing inside her, but she could see he suspected. He watched her differently now, with a tenderness that made her heart ache. The words they spoke were simple. Promises to love and honor and protect, promises to stay through storms and silence, and everything in between. When Daniel slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, Eliza felt something settle inside her. A peace she had never known, a belonging she had never dared to hope for. "I love you," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. I think I have loved you since you opened that door in the storm. I love you too, Eliza replied. I think I have loved you since you picked up a hammer and started fixing my life. Samuel stood between them, bouncing with excitement. Does this mean I can call you Ma for real now? He asked. Eliza knelt down and pulled him into her arms. You have been calling me Ma for months, she said. Nothing changes except now it is official. Samuel beamed. Then he looked at his father. Pa, is is Ma going to have a baby? Daniel's eyebrows shot up. He looked at Eliza, a question in his eyes. Eliza laughed, caught. I was going to tell you tonight, she admitted. Seems our son beat me to it. A baby? Daniel's voice was wondering. Truly, truly? He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, laughing and crying at the same time. Samuel danced around them, shouting about being a big brother. Old Jonah watched with a smile on his weathered face. Your father would have been proud, he said to Eliza. Both your parents would have. You took this mountain and made it a home again. Eliza wiped her eyes. Thank you, Jonah, for everything. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving the new family alone. That night, they sat together on the porch, wrapped in quilts against the autumn chill. Samuel had fallen asleep inside, exhausted from the excitement. The stars wheeled overhead, endless and eternal. You know, Daniel said quietly. The night I knocked on your door, I thought my life was over. I had lost everything, my wife, my purpose, my reason to keep going. What changed? Eliza asked. You opened the door. He turned to look at her. You gave me a place to rest, a reason to work, a chance to be the father Samuel deserved. You saved me. Eliza shook her head. You saved yourself. I just gave you the space to do it. That is what love is, Daniel said. Giving each other space to become who we are meant to be. She leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I used to be so afraid, she admitted, of needing anyone, of letting anyone close. I thought being alone meant being strong. And now I know that real strength is letting people in. Real courage is trusting someone with your heart. Daniel kissed the top of her head. I will never give you reason to regret it, he promised. I know. They sat in silence, watching the stars. And for the first time in her life, Eliza felt completely, perfectly at peace. The baby came in spring, when the wildflowers dotted the ridge in waves of pink and white. A girl. They named her Sarah, after Daniel's first wife, and Rose, after the mountain flowers that surrounded their home. Sarah Rose Harrington took her first breath as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold. She had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, and from the very first moment, she had Samuel wrapped around her tiny finger. She is so small, Samuel whispered, peering into the cradle. Will she always be this small? She will grow, Eliza promised, just like you did. Samuel thought about this. Then can I teach her to ride horses? And find eggs? And count stars? You can teach her everything. The boy's face lit up with purpose. I am going to be the best big brother in the whole world, he declared. And he was. Years passed. The cabin grew. Daniel added more rooms as the more children came, 2 sons who had their mother's laugh and their father's quiet strength. The farm prospered. The mountain that had once felt like a prison became a paradise. Lucas Blackwood never returned. Word came that he had lost everything in a bad investment, that he had slunk off to some eastern city to rebuild his fortune. Eliza did not spare him much thought. He was a ghost from another life. The railroad came eventually, cutting through the East Pass just as Daniel had proposed. It brought trade and travelers, but it never touched their ridge. The mountain remained theirs, wild and free. One evening, when Sarah Rose was 7 and the boys were chasing fireflies in the meadow, Eliza stood at the window of her expanded cabin and watched her family. Daniel came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. She leaned back against him. I am thinking about the night you knocked on my door, she said. I almost did not open it. I know if I had not, none of this would exist. She gestured at the scene before them. The laughing children, the warm cabin, the life they had built together. Daniel kissed her temple. But you did open it. That is what matters. Eliza smiled. My father used to say that hospitality is not optional in a storm. I thought it was just about offering shelter. But it is more than that, is it not? It is about letting people in, taking chances, trusting that kindness will come back to you. It did. Yes. She turned in his arms to face him. It did. They stood together, watching their children play. Eliza thought about the journey that had brought them here. The loss, the loneliness, the fear, and then the storm, and the knock, and the choice that changed everything. She had opened her door to strangers that night. They had walked in and never truly left. And on that ridge, far from the noise of power and gold, a poor young girl had found the richest life she could ever have imagined. Not rich in money, rich in love, rich in family, rich in hope. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire. The children ran inside, hungry and happy, filling the cabin with noise and warmth. Eliza closed her eyes and let the chaos wash over her. This was her life now. This was her home. And she would not trade it for anything in the world. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.